Pastor Jamal Bryant's outburst in church left the entire congregation stunned. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that felt peaceful the moment people stepped inside the church. The soft sound of worship music had just faded, and the congregation slowly settled into their seats. Families sat together, elders nodded gently, and a calm atmosphere filled the room. Nothing about this service felt unusual. It seemed like just another regular Sunday where people came seeking hope, guidance, and comfort. Pastor Jamal Bryant stood at the pulpit with a composed expression. His posture was relaxed, and his voice was steady as he greeted the congregation. He began speaking in a warm and familiar tone, the kind his church was used to hearing week after week. His words focused on faith, patience, and staying strong during difficult times. Many people listened quietly, some taking mental notes, others simply letting the message sink in. As the sermon continued, there was no sign that anything unexpected was about to happen. The pastor appeared calm and in control, moving smoothly from one point to another. Members of the congregation felt comfortable, believing this message would follow the same peaceful path as always. No one could have imagined that within moments, the atmosphere of this church would completely change, turning this ordinary Sunday service into something no one would forget. As Pastor Jamal Bryant continued speaking, something slowly began to change in the room. His tone, which had been calm and welcoming, started to sound more serious. The smile on his face faded, replaced by a focused and thoughtful expression. At first, the change was so slight that only a few people noticed it. The words were still gentle, but there was a deeper meaning behind them now. He began talking about responsibility, about how leaders are meant to protect trust and not break it. He mentioned how faith should never be used for personal gain or hidden intentions. These points were not directed at anyone specific, yet they felt personal. People in the congregation shifted slightly in their seats, sensing that this message was different from what they usually heard. The energy in the church quietly shifted. The room felt heavier, more serious. Conversations in people's minds started forming as they wondered what had inspired this tone. Some listeners leaned forward, paying closer attention. Others exchanged quick glances, unsure of what direction the sermon was taking. Even though the pastor had not raised his voice, his words now carried weight, signaling that something important was about to be said. Suddenly, Pastor Jamal Bryant stopped speaking. The pause was unexpected and long enough for the entire church to notice. The room fell into a deep silence, the kind where even small movements felt loud. He looked out across the congregation, his eyes scanning the room as if he was gathering his thoughts. That moment of silence alone made people uneasy. After the pause, he spoke again, but this time his words were more direct. He referenced a recent situation that had clearly been weighing on his heart. He did not mention any names or details, yet it was obvious that the incident was real and close to him. His voice carried frustration, and his facial expression showed that this was not something he had planned to talk about. As he continued, his body language changed, his shoulders tightened, and his tone became sharper. The message no longer felt like a general lesson. It felt like a response to something that had crossed a line. The congregation could feel the tension building. Whatever had triggered this moment, it had now pushed the pastor to speak from a place of deep emotion, setting the stage for what was about to happen next. Without warning, Pastor Jamal Bryant's voice grew louder. The calm control he had shown earlier seemed to slip away as his emotions took over. His words came faster now, filled with passion and pain. He spoke about how faith should never be played with, and how the church was meant to be a place of honesty, not performance. Every sentence felt heavy, as if it carried weeks of built-up frustration. He questioned the actions of those who claimed to stand for truth, but lived differently behind closed doors. His voice echoed through the church, not out of anger alone, but out of disappointment. This was no longer a gentle sermon. It was a raw and emotional release. People could hear the hurt in his words, making it clear that this outburst came from something deeply personal. The intensity of the moment shocked everyone. No one interrupted, no one moved. The congregation sat frozen as the pastor continued speaking from the heart. This side of him was rarely seen, and the sudden shift left many unsure of how to react. The church that once felt peaceful was now filled with emotion, tension, and disbelief. As Pastor Jamal Bryant finished speaking, the church fell completely silent. The kind of silence that felt heavy and uncomfortable. People sat still, unsure of what to do next. Some looked straight ahead, trying to process what they had just heard. Others slowly turned their heads, quietly checking the reactions of those around them. A few members lowered their eyes, feeling convicted by the words. Some appeared emotional, holding back tears, while others looked shocked, their faces frozen in disbelief. This was not the service they had expected when they walked into church that morning. The message had cut deeper than anyone anticipated. No one clapped, no one spoke. The air felt thick with emotion. It was clear that the outburst had reached the entire congregation. Whether people agreed with the pastor or not, everyone felt the weight of his words. That moment changed the atmosphere completely, leaving the church stunned and unsure of how the service would continue. After the long silence, Pastor Jamal Bryant took a deep breath. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and his voice softened as he spoke again. It was clear that he had become aware of how intense the moment had been. The anger and frustration that had filled his words moments earlier began to fade, replaced by a sense of reflection. He admitted that the emotions he felt were strong and overwhelming. He did not try to excuse the outburst, but instead acknowledged it openly. This honesty shifted the mood in the room. People could see that he was not speaking from pride, but from a place of deep concern and responsibility. The church atmosphere slowly changed. While the tension was still present, it now felt more emotional than uncomfortable. The pastor's pause allowed everyone to breathe and reflect. It became clear that this moment was not about losing control, but about confronting something that had been ignored for too long. With a calmer voice, Pastor Jamal Bryant began to explain the reason behind his reaction. He shared that the emotion people had just witnessed was not rooted in anger, but in pain and concern. He spoke about how difficult it is to watch faith being misused and trust being broken, especially within a place meant to represent truth and love. He made it clear that his words were not meant to attack anyone personally. Instead, they were a reminder of accountability and honesty. He emphasized that leadership comes with responsibility, and when that responsibility is ignored, it affects everyone. His message focused on self-reflection rather than blame. As he continued, people in the congregation started to understand the deeper purpose of the moment. What once felt like an outburst now felt like a warning and a call to do better. The pastor's words encouraged listeners to examine their own actions and intentions, reminding them that faith is not just about words, but about how one lives every day. As the service came to an end, there was no usual rush or noise. People stood up slowly, still lost in thought. Conversations were quiet, and many chose not to speak at all. The message from the pulpit had clearly stayed with them. What had happened during the sermon was not something that could be easily brushed off. Small groups formed as people walked out, sharing hushed thoughts and mixed emotions. Some felt challenged, others felt inspired, and a few were still trying to understand what they had witnessed. The pastor's words echoed in their minds, forcing them to reflect on their own faith and responsibility. Even after leaving the church, the moment continued to linger. It was clear that this Sunday service would be remembered for a long time, not because of the outburst itself, but because of the honesty and intensity behind it. The experience left a lasting impression, one that many would carry with them long after the doors of the church closed. Looking back at that moment, many people continued to question what they had witnessed. Was Pastor Jamal Bryant's outburst a mistake, or was it a necessary wake-up call? Opinions differed, but one thing remained clear: the message could not be ignored. It had forced people to think beyond a normal Sunday sermon. For some, the moment revealed the human side of leadership. It showed that even those in powerful positions feel pressure, disappointment, and concern. For others, it served as a reminder that faith requires honesty, accountability, and courage, even when those conversations feel uncomfortable. In the end, that Sunday was not just about raised voices or strong emotions. It was about truth being spoken in a way that demanded attention. The service became a turning point, leaving the congregation with a question that stayed in their hearts long after the day ended. Sometimes, is discomfort the first step toward real change?